Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Sutherland.
It is an absolute pleasure to be here.
So, I wonder if you can start by just giving us a definition of your work. So, what do you mean when you talk about Black memory work and Black digital afterlives?
Wow, thank you. What an important question and a perfect place to begin. When we think about, I'm going to start with the latter half actually and talk about digital afterlives for a moment, and then I'll come back to Black memory work. When we talk about digital afterlives, we're really talking about the data that's collected by us, for us, about us. That includes anything from our social media to our email to our communications, such as text messages, instant messages, right? All of this content that we're producing in our own personal lives, and then actual data, bits and bytes. When you take a photograph, the metadata from that gets collected on your phone. So if you have an iPhone, right, that information then goes to Apple. They're collecting that data and that metadata. They're collecting the time of the photograph, the location of the photograph, some information, some other information about the image itself. And increasingly with the use of AI, that includes some maybe sort of description about what might appear in the image. This is a sort of a new added layer of what is being collected and noted. And then when you pass away, the question becomes what is done with all of this data. And so in many ways, we have what I have termed a digital afterlife, where all of this data and our digital detritus lives on after we do. And we have very little say in terms of what is done with that data, how it's used, how it might be manipulated. There are, as we know now, digital resurrection and other kinds of digital immortality practices. All of these things kind of get tied up in what we mean when we say a digital afterlife. When I talk about Black memory work, I'm looking at all of the harms, the potential harms that can be served up by a digital afterlife. And I'm looking to Black memory work, which really describes a long history, robust history of practices within the Black community, within Black communities, diasporic communities across the globe that are about preserving memory in ways that make sense to us. And in some ways, I think about Black memory work as a corrective or as an alternative path to a digital afterlife, something more intentional, right? Something that we craft for ourselves.
Can you talk about like what inspired you and like what interested you in this work and how it inspired the writing of your book?
I had been thinking about this in some way, shape, or form since my childhood. I was distressed as a child to see the Save the Children campaign. Do you remember this?
Mm-hmm.
On television, commercials for evening TV, there would be pictures of starving children and ostensibly starving children. And they would show it was always Black children. They always had very distended bellies. What we would now probably refer to colloquially as poverty porn, right? We were looking at black babies in distress. And as a child, I remember being struck by how it only ever was kids who looked like me. And it didn't make sense to me as a child. I didn't have a language or reference points really to understand what I was seeing or to make sense of it or even to sort of contend with it. And then when Hurricane Katrina happened, I was immediately taken back to those pictures, to those commercials, to those ads, to that entire ad campaign. And I thought, we are seeing dead people who look like me on television once again, and now on the internet as well, in the overflowing waters of Lake Pontchartrain. Right. We are once again looking at images of Black people, Black people's bodies in distress, deceased, and it's being presented to us as something that we should take in without any real context or, again, any real context or any, we aren't given tools with which to process what we're seeing. And I thought, there's got to be a reason. that it's always people who look like me. And that reason can't just be racism. What else is at play here? And so that sort of became the center of the inquiry at the center of the inquiry for my book, Resurrecting the Black Body, which is about race and the digital afterlife, and really explores these questions in depth.
And what are some of the most common practices of Black memory work that we may not even realize that we're practicing?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. So we are very creative. We have, we look at, when I say we right now, I'm talking about the Black Memory Collective, which is a small community-based organization that I run, and that I'm the founder and director of. And when we talk about Black memory work, the kinds of practices that we first started talking about and seeing were things like quilts, right? It was we understand memory to be braided in someone's hair as a route to freedom. We understand Black memory work to be quilting. We understand Black memory work in a way that other people might not recognize it. Other people might call someone a hoarder, for example, and that's not to say that there aren't issues around hoarding, but it is to say that when you have been dispossessed of your physical belongings repeatedly over generations, there's something to that holding on to things, right? That is about a memory process, a memory ritual, a memory practice, right? If you're not out here hoarding or braiding hair or quilting, don't think you're not doing Black memory work. Certainly, our photographs and the things that we might find in the boxes under our beds, that's Black memory work. In an even more expansive way, we are finding that the way that folks show up for one another in community is also about a memory practice or a memory ritual. It's about building memory, and that memory then gets held in community. And I think that's a lot of it, right? Just the ways that we are showing up in community and asking one another to hold things for for ourselves, for our communities, all of that counts as Black memory work.
You know, as you're talking, Tanya, I'm thinking about this large black leather purse that my grandmother had that had
Mhm.
all of these photos. And every time I would go home for like holidays, like I'm going straight to this purse to like ask my aunts and uncles, like, tell me about this picture, like, who was this? And really wanting to like understand like why there was these collection of photos. It
Mhm.
also makes me think about how important it was to my grandmother that anytime she went to a funeral, she had to have a program, right? And
Yes.
then would come back
Yes.
from the funeral and like put it in the back of her Bible, right? And so it feels like, as a culture, like as a community, it feels like we have been doing this Black memory work, even if we weren't calling it that.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We have so many, it's in our art. It's literally woven into the fabrics of our culture. Yeah.
So what are some of the
That image, I love it. Yeah, I love the thought of a big black bag full of Black memory.
yeah, I need to figure out where that purse is so that that doesn't get like displaced. And like, we always kind of have an eye on where that is and who has ownership of that. So, what are
Absolutely.
some of the differences between Black memory practices and maybe more widespread, like Western archival practices?
In a brick and mortar archives, what you will find is that there are papers, and those papers go in boxes, and those boxes go on shelves, and there are processes by through which things may cross the archival threshold or enter the archives. There are high level descriptive practices, high level discovery practices, high level access practices that really are about ensuring the longevity of those materials, and the condition of them in that very specific way. And for the most part, the brick and mortar archives that exist in the United States were created to document the dominant culture, right? The ways that we tend to show up in those archives is in newspapers, in databases of runaway slave ads. The institutions that hold those archives have not traditionally made it their agenda, their goal, or their policy to document Black life. And if they do, what they're documenting is the Save the Children campaign and the bodies in Lake Pontchartrain. They're documenting trauma, death, and disposition. Black memory work does the exact opposite of that. It starts with us. It starts from the bottom. It holds us. It is generative. It shifts. It doesn't have to stay static. It doesn't. It's not. There's no demand that it be accessible, broadly, widely accessible. We. It's a. In so many ways, it is. They are side by side practices that almost have nothing to do with one another because the goals aren't the same, the practices and the policies aren't the same. They can speak to one another, they could influence one another. Certainly, um, black memory workers who call themselves such often are trained as archivists, so they come with the knowledge of how to, often but not always, they come with the knowledge of how to preserve materials. What they're doing with that knowledge isn't just preserving materials, putting them in a box on a shelf and saying, hey, come and visit my brick and mortar archives to visit your stuff. They're saying, I know how to preserve this. Let me show you. Let me teach you. Let me help you. And so it's also a knowledge practice in a way, and a generational one in a different way than institutional brick and mortar archives like the National Archives or even the Library of Congress, or I mean even your whatever local repository or university archives may hold. They are set about to do sort of different things.
Mm. And what do you feel like is the goal of Black memory work then? If it's not, if it's a different goal, like you said, than archiving.
Yeah, I think what I've observed, what I've heard people say, is that we need to preserve our memory. No one else is doing that for us. And we're going to do it in a way that is intentionally Black. And so that shows up differently, right? We show up differently in intentionally Black spaces. The work is done differently in intentionally Black spaces. And I, I want to be really clear that not everyone who is a Black memory worker, right? Again, your grandmother is a Black memory worker, right? That bag, that's Black memory work. So it doesn't matter that she didn't have a master's degree in library and information studies or science, right? I assume she did not anyway.
No.
Neither of my grandmothers did either, and I would absolutely call both of them Black memory workers. I think the purpose and the goal for us is about preservation of memory. It's also about preservation of cultural heritage, and there's a certain protective layer, I want to say, for future generations that's very intentional there too.
And so is it, Tanya, a more personal kind of like, okay, it is for my family to kind of preserve the history of our family, not
Mhm.
necessarily for me to like learn about your family, right? Because that's kind of what it feels like. It's like, oh, with archiving, like you can go visit like a library or museum and like learn more. This feels like it is a more personal thing, maybe for your community. Well, definitely your direct family, but maybe also your community that is still like close to the family.
Absolutely, I would say that's true, and I would also say, that in terms of concentric circles of community and how we build and how we live and work with one another, there are many sort of points of possible or potential interaction and with other people's historical memories, right? I know that Ancestry has become a very popular site. I have my own issues with it, but part of what it's done is help help people who otherwise couldn't even make those family connections be able to make those family connections. So I think Black memory work serves a similar function as well, in as much as, you're telling a story and you mention a name, and the next thing you know, it's your cousin from down the street, or somebody else mentions a name and it's your cousin from down the street. Oh, I have a picture of him, right? And its storytelling is also a really key element of Black memory work. As we are telling one another's stories, as we're telling our own family stories, as we all of those things that we hold in collective, I think makes it more communal, more community based and community oriented. And also, if there is a desire to do long-term preservation work, those that requires resources, and it's generally going to be easier to do that in community, right? So if, for example, one of the things that the Black Memory Collective in Los Angeles is talking about doing is building a repository of sorts, perhaps a digital repository to hold photographs, to hold recipes. We're still talking with the broader community about who would want to participate, who should hold and steward it, um, what an ingest process would look like. And then it starts to really feel like we're having the conversation about a brick and mortar archives, right? So it shifts. It doesn't stop being Black memory work, but it takes on sort of the patina of
Mhm.
of traditional archival space.
So, in your work, you also talk about Black memory work being restorative and healing. Can you talk about what ways, like, what does that look like for Black memory work to actually heal?
We have there's a member of our collective who is very interested in birth stories, and part of the so when I said storytelling, narrative is, I think, is a really really important part of Black memory work, because it is in part about telling our stories, preserving those stories for the future and for our children, our grandchildren, our descendants, our communities more broadly. And so Dominique, I don't think she would mind me naming her, is doing really beautiful work around talking with people who have difficult birth stories and recording those stories for their own for she's doing the recording for that person so that they can have something to hold. So in some instances they may not have a child to hold, but they now have a story that they can hold that has been told to someone who is holding it in care and in community with them. And I think there's something very healing and restorative about that kind of practice. And we think about all of that as Black memory work.
Tanya, you started off by giving some very powerful examples of like things in your personal experience that have shaped your interest in doing this work. So you talked about the Save the Children campaign as well as Hurricane Katrina. And I'm wondering, you're talking about that as like, as told to us, right? Like these messages and stories that we saw. But what you're talking about with Black memory work is us owning this process. I wonder, what does it look like for something like Hurricane Katrina, or even I'm thinking about the pandemic, right? Like how traumatic that was for so many of us, and how many of us lost loved ones and lost experiences and all kinds of things. What does it look like in Black memory work to hold space for both the joy of like Black life, but also the more painful parts of it?
That's exactly right. What a beautiful question. That's something that I think about a lot. I taught a course last in the fall of 2024. Yes, in the fall of 2024 on Black memory work. And there's not much written about it in the professional literature, certainly not in information studies. And so I'm, casting about a little bit, looking for materials for my students to read. And at about halfway through the quarter, they came to me and they said, Professor Sutherland, this is beautiful and we're really enjoying this class. But if we had one note for you, more joy, please. More joy. Because it was actually very easy to find it was a lot easier to find representations or examples of how we are actually holding space for one another in tragedy and in trauma, than it was to find things written about how we are holding one another in joy. So I'm really glad that you asked that question, because with COVID, so much loss, there are there are a lot of community based like um, grassroots level projects to document people's experiences with COVID. I can't say the same thing was true with Katrina in the same way, but it certainly is true now with COVID. There are oral history projects, all kinds of things that are sort of attuned to that kind of pain. I think where we are maybe not doing as good a job is finding and finding those moments of celebration and lifting those up. What, I want to see us. I want to. Part of Black memory work is teaching the kids how to play spades, right? Like we gotta know how to play dominoes. If we don't know, then we're only bringing the bad stuff with us through the generations. So I know y'all want to gatekeep, but teach the kids, teach them babies how to play spades and dominoes. Okay, teach.
So what I hear you saying, Tanya, is that I got to break out my hula hoop and teach the babies how to do the hula hoop.
We need double dutch. I want to see you in
Yes.
the air waiting. Okay, that's what I want to see. That's right. Yeah. Many years ago there was a project in Trinidad that was I'm not going to remember exactly what it was called, but it was a cultural memory project, and the idea was sort of this living museum. What a beautiful notion. They had a storyteller who was there to tell the stories of Afro-Caribbeans, Afro-Trinidadians in the Caribbean. There was hopscotch, and they would teach anybody who didn't know how to play. And I thought that, right? We need more of this. We need more living museums, so to speak. More of that energy anyway,
Mm-hmm.
if not that exact formulation.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that. So I think lots of people who are enjoying our conversation will, hear this and like feel like it's beautiful and be very inspired and then feel like, "Oh my gosh, where do I start?" Right? Like what does it look like for me to have my own personal family kind of black memory work? So what would you suggest to them for how to get started?
I would say look to your people, right? Look to yourself. What are you collecting? What are you collecting? Because we're all collecting something, even if we're not really aware of it. So stop and take a beat. And what is it you're collecting? Is it shoes? Honey, I'm not mad at you. Just ask yourself, what is it, right? Because shoes are important. All God's children need traveling shoes, right? Ask yourself what you're collecting and then look and see, talk to your people. What are they collecting? My mother is a tremendously hardworking person and a really brilliant cook. I don't know that she would tell you that she is a collector of recipes, or that she is a collect or that she is the keeper of our family culinary traditions. I don't know that she would see that in herself, but I see it very clearly, and it's something I want to make sure gets preserved, not restored, but preserved, respected, held, right? So those are the kinds of things I would practice. My dad, for example, is a lover of music and has a tremendous record and other music collection. I don't think if you asked my dad, what he collects, that he would say music, and he probably wouldn't even consider himself a music aficionado. He just likes music. But those are the family stories, right? He comes from a line of musicians, and he's probably not thinking about the history of his own family as being important to his love of music, right? So I think we start there. We really start by looking inward and looking outward and having conversations with the people closest to us, and then we go a little bit further out. Talk to my cousins. I talk to my aunties, and then at the same time, right, if you have once you feel like you have the capacity for it, start talking to other people in your community, start talking to people at church, or trying to think of where else people gather these days. We've become so dispersed. Ask people when you're playing cards, ask people at wherever it is, at the cookout. The cookout is
Mhm.
actually the perfect place to have this conversation, to start this conversation.
Yeah. As we are kind of
Yeah.
moving quickly into the holiday season, it feels like a good time to think about, so for example, in the things you've shared, right? Like, would it be an opportunity maybe for you to like record your dad talking about a couple of his favorite albums, or to record mom as she's preparing, whatever for the holiday dishes, as a way of kind of getting started with some of these conversations?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Get your phone out, record. Also, make sure they tell you, make sure they tell you, record it, but make sure they tell you, don't just record mom doing what she's doing, but learn it with your hands too, right? There's something really important, an important aspect of Black memory work is the cultural transmission. And cultural transmission is fancy speak for, handed down from generation to generation. And by that we mean like physically, it's a practice that has been transmitted from one generation to the next. So I learned how to roll out a roti dough from my auntie in Trinidad. I now have that memory in my muscle. I have muscle memory of how to do that. I can teach my son how to roll out a roti. So if I had just had a video of Auntie doing it, Auntie Noreen doing it, maybe I could still teach my son, maybe. Um, but having that muscle memory is really important, which is why I'm saying I want to see the kids with their hands in the
Mm-hmm.
air waiting to jump in for double dutch, right? The recordings, we can take all of the preservation practices to heart and utilize them, and digital things vanish. We you know, like sometimes those things get lost. It's a lot harder to lose something if you know it in your body.
Mm-hmm. So this feels like a like perfect intersection of where we started in talking about, you know, Black memory work and then digital afterlife, right? Because what we're talking about is these videos that kind of live beyond us. And I'm sure, as we know, that there are all kinds of like ethical considerations around like digital archives and who has the permission to share. Can you talk about like some of the ethical considerations, especially when we're thinking about digital afterlives?
Yes. So I start from a place of concern and care when it comes to any kind of digital recording. I don't often allow myself to be recorded, in fact, because if there is no digital video of me, then there can't be an AI deep fake of me saying some stuff I would never say, doing some stuff I would never do, and then having that be, you know, 100 years from now, what my descendants are looking back on and thinking, oh, that was Tanya. So that's what we don't want. That's sort of the core of the ethical concern, is that our images and likenesses, which we already know are typically taken in moments of trauma and despair, those are the images that are then held, kept, right? That's the about us and sort of on our behalves, not by us and for us approach. And there are ethical concerns that one can raise and think through in terms of access and sharing. And I have a lot of thoughts about that. I think we should be thinking about what is appropriate access, but who determines what is appropriate, right? I think that should be done at the community level. Whoever the community is that's being affected or influenced or included in whatever the digital project is. I'm thinking about Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was big on the photograph and the potential, what it could do for us. He did not, and by the way, when I say us, I mean Black folks. He did not think that this was a technology, that photography was a technology that should be used to convince white people that Black folks had value. He didn't think a photograph should be necessary, that any kind of technology could, in fact, demonstrate the value of a Black life to somebody who didn't want to see it. So imagine in the year 2022, 2023, somewhere in there, when I got on Beyonce's internet and I saw an image, a photograph of Frederick Douglass that had been reanimated. So it was, I think, done through Ancestry or one of those companies. And he's shaking his head back and forth, back and forth. And I thought, everything I know about this man from the words that came out of his mouth, he would hate this and would not stand behind it at all. And for me, that's where the ethical issues start. If we have no agency and no ability to say what is going to be done with those materials, and we know that there is a long history of using our images in nefarious ways that end up harming us, doing further harm, then that's for me the first ethical flag. That's where we have to start. We have to start with people having a certain amount of agency and being able to say, yes, I want to do that, or no, I don't. It's got to be a consent based model. And then I think we have to be really careful. You know, I said the thing about gatekeeping earlier in kind of a joking way, but there are real needs for gatekeeping, and it's because we are collecting materials for beautiful reasons and not nefarious ones. And we don't want to open ourselves up to further attack. Right.
Yeah, and I guess that's my next question for you, Tanya, because you've already talked about like how dispersed we all are, right? Like, the cookout largely doesn't exist, all the time, maybe as it did kind of historically. And so many of the ways that we are creating community and talking with one another about these kinds of things is online. And so, what does it look like
Mhm.
to gatekeep when so many of these conversations and ways that we are kind of practicing Black memory work kind of happen in public?
That's a really, really important point. And the thing that immediately occurred to me as you were speaking is all of the times that I have seen a meme pop up, excuse me, where I've seen a meme pop up on the internet, and then a whole bunch of people, non-melanated people, rushing in to be like, explain it to me, explain it to me. I don't get it. Like,
Mm.
I don't get it. And I have seen gatekeeping happening there in a way that I'm like, that's right. You know exactly what to do. You understood the assignment. Your people are like, I'm not going to tell you that. It's actually none of your business. So
Mhm. Mhm.
that's us business. And I have been very impressed actually with our ability to find ourselves in community online. Black Twitter, while it was a thing, was a very it was open. Nobody, it's not like you couldn't follow some accounts and find your way into Black Twitter. But if you didn't have a guide of some kind, if you didn't know where to start, Black Twitter might as well have been a locked room in a castle somewhere. In like you couldn't like you could not find us, queens. We were mm-mm. Okay, like we just were not, we weren't available like that. And even though we were right there saying the stuff that we were saying in public on a very open public platform. So I think that we've always found ways. We're very creative folks. And it's one of the things that's actually impressed me most about studying the way that Black people kind of move on the internet, um, is that somehow the the way that we are in real life, of course, gets
Yeah.
echoed,
Yeah.
and we understand the assignment.
You bringing up Black
Yeah.
Twitter just unlocked all of these memories for me because you're right. Like it was not like a place to go. You did have to know kind of like who you needed to follow and like the stories and like the things that we would revisit year after year. Like it was very much a if you know kind of thing. And thinking about,
Exactly.
I think how difficult it was for people when ownership of Twitter changed, right? And so then it very much felt like not a safe place or as safe as it could be for Black folks to kind of congregate and, just the rise in bots and trolling. And so it very much feels like that was a place where there were so many, I think, rich cultural conversations about like just what it means to be Black right now. And now that doesn't
Mhm.
exist in the same way. And so, like, can you
Yeah.
help me talk through like what does it mean for us to gather in a place like a Black Twitter that is not owned by us, right? That we have no control over and like became so meaningful for so many people, and then for it to kind of be disbanded and what that means in terms of like Black
Yeah.
memory work.
What a lesson to have learned, right? That when you don't control your own spaces, they can be taken from you, even no matter how much time, energy, effort, labor has been invested into that space. And seeing what has become of Twitter, you know, it's not even a place that you want to hang out or be. So I'm watching the development of Black Sky with great interest because I think that a fair number of Black Twitter users, at least those in academic circles, migrated over to Blue Sky. There's a Black Sky that has been very intentionally developed to kind of combat that very thing. What happens if Blue Sky
Mhm.
goes down? We don't want to lose our space. So I'm watching the development of Black Sky with great interest. I'm also noticing that we are finding ourselves, we are finding community in similar ways on Instagram and TikTok, but Instagram, much like Facebook and Twitter, it's not what it once was, right? It's not this, you can't have the same kind of community that you might have once been able to build. And so we're seeing this actually happen over and over and over again. And the lesson is that we have to build it, right? We have to build our own thing if we want to have our own thing, and have it remain. And the remaining part
Mm.
has to be really intentional. It just really has to be. We can't build a black sky, and this is no shade to the black sky creators. I don't know what their intentions are, but we can't build a black sky and then allow it to, ask everybody to come and be part of that, and and then be like,
Mm.
oh yeah, actually it's a fire fest, right? We're not going to do that in our own communities to each other, because everybody else has is
Mhm.
we yeah, yeah. So some amount of
Right.
fortifying, self fortifying, I think, is really important in digital spaces as well. So all of the Black creators, all of the Black entrepreneurs, all of the Black tech folks out there, you know get yourselves together. Let's be in conversation and make sure that we are building things in a way that will allow them to last. Now, that being said, I also want to say that not everything is made to last forever, and that there is real value in allowing a process of forgetting. There's value in that process of letting go, right? And so I think we need to be really careful too that we're not trying to hold on to something just for the sake of holding on to it.
What does it look like for us to have agency in this process? Because it feels like this stuff is like growing exponentially, like much quicker than like legislation can keep up with it, and all of the things. Not that legislation is ever like the be all end all for us anyway, but it very much feels like there's very little regulation, and we are not keeping at pace with like the way AI is growing. So what kinds of things can we do to like protect ourselves and to be thinking about like how to retain our agency and consent as technology continues to expand?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that the law can't keep up. Um, Certainly, the legislation is nowhere near the pace of technological development. And the folks who are working in that space have been sounding alarm bells for a long hot minute. I'm thinking of people like Alondra Nelson, Ruha Benjamin, Safia Noble, myself. Right? We've Andre Brock. We've been sounding bells and sounding bells, and I think that what's challenging is that everybody wants to play, right? Everybody wants to play with the technology. Everybody wants to know how ChatGPT works, and I don't think there's enough information, that folks don't have enough information to know that there are potential downline effects or concerns, right? If you aren't a person who's watching Black Mirror, you see ChatGPT as something that can just help you do X, Y, or Z, right? It can help you get a recipe together. I wouldn't even trust it to do that, but it can help you do all kinds of things. What I think is it's being sold, right? It's a product, it's being sold. What's not being told to people is that all of the back end data collection is doesn't make a large language model a responsible tool for your health, your wellness, your anything, right? And looking to these digital tools like that is, in the long run, going to be deleterious. These are the alarm bells that people keep trying to raise. So I would say, I know it's really easy for me to say do your homework. But when I say do your homework, I'm not saying like you need to read my book. Please do read my book. I'm not saying that you need to go out and read a bunch of academic books. I'm not saying that you need to go read a bunch of academic articles. I'm not even saying that, and I would encourage you to try to read the terms of service, but they write them in such a way that that's not, they don't want you to read them, right? When I say do your homework, talk to people. Again, talk to people about their experiences. ask Ask the person that you know that is closest to these technologies, or closest to this as their life's work, or do you know someone who is in tech? Do you know someone who knows a little thing or two about coding? Ask them, hey, what do you think about this technology? Do you think I should be taking any steps to protect myself if I'm using TikTok in particular? Because every technology is going to be different and have different concerns, right, that come with it. For me, it's not actually possible to craft a life in which I'm never going to be recorded. That doesn't mean that I'm not making more intentional offline choices, right? And so there's balance there too. Understanding that we are not going to be able to keep up with the pace of how the technology is developing. It's not going to be legislated rapidly enough in a way that's going to protect us. What steps can we take? Understand how the technology works, understand who owns the technology, understand what they are gaining by giving you something that looks free. They are gathering your data, they're packaging it, they're reselling it. You are the product, right? TikTok isn't the product, YouTube isn't the product. It is a little bit, but you are the product, right? You are the person, your data is extraordinarily valuable. So perhaps the first question is, how much of myself do I want to give up? It's a hard one, but it is a compromise, and it is one that you're making every time you use these technologies. How much of myself do I want to give up? How much of how much information do I want to share? How much of my data do I want them to have? And yes, if you know somebody that works in any of these industries, ask them. Ask them, is there something I should be concerned about here?
I'm curious, Tanya, in because you said you taught a class, I think last year. What kinds of conversations are young people having about, like consent and like all of this, right? Because I think you'd often think about young people as being very eager to kind of be on top of technological advances, but I would imagine there's also some pushback in thinking through, like, okay, what do I want this to mean in 20 years from now? So I'm just curious, like, what kinds of insights they share, maybe as a part of the class.
So I teach undergrads, and I teach an undergraduate class called Information and Power, where we really go into a lot of these questions. And then I taught that Black Memory Work class, and it's interesting because they kind of sit at opposite ends of an intellectual spectrum, right? Again, where the information and power is, it's it's content more like the digital afterlife conversation that we're having, where we talk about things like consent, we talk about data collection, we talk about surveillance. And every time without fail, these students are learning something, which that's not just a credit to me as a professor. I'm not patting myself on the back. What I'm saying is that they didn't know which things to be worried about or concerned about, and the class gives them an opportunity to think about how they want to engage. And I always assign, in this information and power class, a 48-hour offline assignment where they have to go for 48 hours, and they're not allowed to use their student ID. They're not allowed to use their phones, no digital technologies. You can use electricity, listen to your girl, put your records on. Okay. I love it. But what you can't do is call an Uber or a Lyft. You can't use your student ID to get into your dorm or into the dining hall. And it doesn't take more than 48 hours for people to realize how much of their lives is absolutely controlled and determined by outside forces, tech that are, run by technology companies. They're like, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. I basically had to sit at home for 48 hours, have people, like, have my roommate bring me food. I just didn't realize, I just didn't see it. And I think once you see it, it's hard to unsee.
That sounds like a powerful little example and a real opportunity for many of us to practice. Like, what would it even be like for 24 hours to like not engage with any of your devices like that?
Yes, that's right. And to really observe, well,
Mm-hmm.
what can I do and what can't I do? Right? Where can I go? Can I get on the subway? Can I take the bus? Do I have to have my phone to pay my bills? Do, like, it's a lot of things that are touched by technologies in ways that we can't opt out. And so I think what tends to happen is, this is the moment for people and everyone who's listening. I would encourage you to take this moment for yourself and just say, how much of myself do I want to give up? How much of my time? Understanding that I can't completely opt out. I can't say no. I don't want to have to use my phone ever. It's not really practical in our modern society. But that doesn't mean that you have to be posting every single thought that you have or a bazillion selfies, right? Like maybe there's room in there for moderation, for thoughtfulness, for consideration, for taking a bit of a step back and reevaluating.
It's been so wonderful to learn so much more about your work, Tonia. I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. Please let us know where we can stay connected with you and learn more about the work that you're doing. Do you have a website as well as any social media handles you'd like to share?
Sure. My website, thank you, Dr. Joy. Thank you so much. This has been a delight. My website is at toniasutherland.com. And you can find links to my socials there, but you can pretty much find me either at Tonia Sutherland or at Tonia.Sutherland, depending on the platform.
And the name of the book and where can we find it?
Oh, okay, yes. The name of the book is Resurrecting the Black Body, Race and the Digital Afterlife, and you can find it anywhere that books are sold. You can order it directly through the University of California Press website. You can get it on Amazon, or please try your local bookshop.
Beautiful. We'll be sure to include all of that in our show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tonia.